Hello, everyone. This is Chris Calicut for the CT Sports Report. I hope you guys are having a wonderful Monday afternoon. Special Monday show for you today. As I'm sure you already noticed, we are down one team member today. Mr. Cody Teague is under the weather, my partner in crime, as always, but will not be joining us today. So, with that said, today will just be a little bit more of a March Madness preview. Cody and I will review our brackets later in the week. We both have made a bracket in the CT Sports Report Bracket Challenge, and you can follow that as a pinned tweet on our Twitter, which is CT_Sports Report, and you can also find that on Facebook at CT Sports Report as well. So we're going to miss Cody today, but like I said, please join us in our bracket challenge and see what we have going on there, and we'll review and reveal our brackets a little bit later on in the week once Cody gets to feeling a little better. Rest up, my friend. We'll miss you tonight, but we'll see you later on this week. So I just wanted to do more of a recap of Selection Sunday, the snubs, the lucky legends, as I'm going to call them. Some controversy, a semi-controversy at number one seeds this year, and also the coverage. And that's where I want to start this evening, is the coverage of Selection Sunday and the lead up to this in general. So we'll start with ESPN, and I'm probably not going to make very many friends tonight in the media world, but that's okay. Excuse me. But let's start with Joe Lunardi of ESPN, Mr. Bracketology himself. I wish, with all that is within me, that I could have a job like that, spew nonsense and crunch numbers, put things in a computer and hope for the best, much like Joe Lunardi does for the last 2 to 4 weeks of the basketball season. And it's nonstop. You'll get in-game cut-ins with Joe Lunardi for bracketology. You know, where's this team going to be, Joe? Well, where do you have this one moving? What's their prognosis? Are they in or are they out? His last 4 in, last 4 out change by the minute. And, of course, lots of games going on. I understand that. But, I mean, really? Is it necessary? It's almost like the overblown coverage for college players leading into the NBA draft. You have your green room guys, as they called them, that upset North Carolina coach Roy Williams earlier in the year, to where they were saying, oh, Bryce Johnson's going to be a green room guy. Well, Roy was saying it's hard enough to coach as it is, keeping the guys focused, let alone them thinking about their draft stock, 6 months from now. With the NBA draft being in June, but that statement was made back in December or January. But yeah, just in general, I'm okay with the ESPN coverage. I like most of the ESPN college basketball analysts. I think they did a pretty good job with the follow-up with the Selection Sunday special that they did, along with the great Jay Billis on SportsCenter last night, sort of reviewing his teams with John Butchiegross in that SportsCenter episode at 11 p.m. So like Jay Williams, Seth Greenberg, those type of guys, they're smart. They're kind of shock jock type folks, but you kind of have to be. But those two guys, Greenberg and Williams, play really well off of each other. I enjoy their coverage. You have good play-by-play guys, so it's kind of a sad venture to not get a little more coverage by ESPN for the NCAA tournament. Now let's lead into what the main broadcast was last night on CBS, which traditionally carries the NCAA tournament, of course. But this year, they are partnering, as they did last year, with Turner Sports. CBS will be covering, or they covered the March Madness Selection Sunday special, and then the National Championship apparently will not be on CBS broadcast television this year. It will be on cable television for, I believe, the first time. And if it's not the first time, it's been many, many years since it has not been on broadcast television, but it'll be on TBS, Turner Broadcasting Station, on cable. So folks like Cody, who have cut the cord, so to speak, will not have access to the national championship games. I don't understand that move whatsoever. CBS has covered it for many, many years. They've done a fairly nice job over it for the most part. You have Jim Nantz, Bill Raftery, probably Grant Hill. I think they revealed the announced team for the main tournament last night as well. So I'm sad to see it leave the broadcast station, but you'll probably get a lot of the same aspects. It's just I don't think you're going to have as many viewers in your older generation and your younger generation with TBS. I think a lot of your families and things like that obviously will have cable and access to TBS, but we shall see what the numbers say at the end of the line. But going to the Selection Sunday special that CBS aired starting at 5:30 last night, a little earlier than usual, they did a 2-hour special. 2 hours. 4 brackets, 2 hours. That's, if you're good at math, that's, it's two brackets an hour, guys. I remember when this special was 30, sometimes 60 minutes at the absolute most. You did your brackets. You had a couple of pieces of analysis here and there, and you were done. What is with Charles Barkley and that godforsaken screen that he was choosing teams on last night? I don't need that in my life, guys. On NBA coverage, fine. Give me that team. They're entertaining. I love Ernie Johnson. Kenny Smith is pretty solid as well. But my goodness gracious. Some of that was just absolutely atrocious. And I know they want to bring it in because Turner has a lot of the coverage. That's fine. They want to put it in. They also want to sell advertising to that. So longer time period, more advertising spots, squeeze the money out of every minute that they can. It's just I was half asleep halfway through. I didn't even want to fill out my bracket at that point. And it was really bad, and what's always really bad, and it's great intention, is the cutaway to the school that gets picked. I love seeing the natural reaction from those teams that gets picked. If they're a bubble team, you're overjoyed. If you're a number 1 seed, that was a lot. You get the golf clap, just like North Carolina did last night. But here's the issue with that. Satellite feeds, especially if you're in a big stadium like that where a lot of the viewing parties are 5 to 10 seconds behind the actual broadcast. So they might have the screen up there for 5 seconds, but you still never see a reaction. And then, the announcers are there for the obligatory joke, oh, the satellite feed's a little rough there. Well, then don't do it if the concept isn't going to work. Dumb it back down, simplify it, give me the teams, have a couple of good interviews scheduled if you really, really want to. Have actual experts up there talking about it who have either had inside information with the committee before or have a really, really long tenure in college basketball, either as a renowned player or a coach or something along those lines. Don't give me all this 2-hour fluffy nonsense. All right, that's enough about that. Let's get to the actual tournament itself. Definitely some prizes that the committee revealed, most definitely. Both good and bad. Let's start out with what I'm going to call the Lucky Legends. The last few teams that were put in included Temple, Michigan, Syracuse, and Tulsa. Okay, Tulsa, I'll give you that. Not a perennial powerhouse, but has good tradition in the NCAA tournament, especially back in the late 90s, early 2000s. Michigan, of course, brand built for success for the most part. Had a fairly mediocre season with some iffy losses, but really gets in on that legendary status. And speaking of legends, Syracuse, Coach Jim Boeheim. I was hoping and praying that they would get in because I wanted at least 7, maybe 8 teams from the ACC being located here in North Carolina. Syracuse typically is the perennial powerhouse, but with some sanctions thrown in, Boeheim suspended for the first few games of the year. I think it was 8 games of the year, but returned against North Carolina in their first couple of conference games. Either they showed up because Benajay for Syracuse is a fantastic basketball player. He can do it all. He can fill the bucket up. He can pass it off. He can shake you off the dribble. Fantastic player. And that's one guy that you're going to have to plan for. And then you have Trevor Cooney, who is a sharpshooter who's having a slightly down year as a senior. So Syracuse is one of those teams that could be dangerous if they get going, but they could be absolutely dreadful and get blown out by a lower seed if they're having an off night. But like I said, they're one of those lucky legends. Temple also has a reputation that, precedes them as a potential upset type team. And they were fantastic again back in the late 90s. So that leads me to believe a lot of the committee members were, around during that time paying attention. But also this tells me one thing, excuse me, that even as a mid-major, the little guys, even if you go on the road, play some non-conference games against the bigger teams in the power conferences, you're very, very competitive with those teams, or you might even pick up an upset win. That doesn't matter. You're not in the Power 5 conference. Sorry, guys. It's just bad luck. Sorry. See you next year. Oh, probably not, because you're still not going to be in a power conference. To me, this sends off a bad message. Of course, we have your conference champions and your conference tournament champions, automatic bids. I think it's 32 of them, somewhere thereabouts. 38 possibly. It's in the 30s somewhere. I apologize. I don't know the exact number. But then you have all those bubble teams there. You have to include all the Division I conferences plus the Ivy League, which for the last year put their regular season champion in. Next year they're going to have a conference tournament as well. But you have your conference tournament champions in. It really tells me it's sending a bad message to the smaller schools. Schedule whoever you want, compete at a high level, may even pick up a couple of wins, like I said, but it's not going to matter. We would rather have the more named programs that have mediocre seasons at best, some of them, rather than the little guy with the Cinderella story potential. And just to rattle off a few of those little guys, you have my favorite team as far as the celebration. Some people love it. Some people hate them. It's sort of the Cam Newton theory, except with all these guys, they're 5'11" and white playing basketball. So, I mean, it's a little different. So you get the dorky, funny side of these guys with all their celebrations, especially on three-point baskets. And that's, again, Monmouth, who was 27-7 all the year and was very, very solid. Played a couple of big games on the road, but then, of course, had a couple of dreaded losses as well. And that seems to be the running ground for what the snubs were for the small guys. You have your San Diego States, who was 25-9. St. Mary's 27-5, who had a pretty good season in the West Coast Conference, but Gonzaga ended up taking the title from them in the conference tournament. So St. Mary's was on the outside looking in and unfortunately did not make it in due to the Zags getting the somewhat of an upset in their conference tournament. Then you have the Bonnies of St. Bonaventure, 22-8 on the year. Another small team that always is really good from the outside, is pretty solid in the way of, just competing with everything, and having that terrier-like type of attitude with them. And you look on down, you have a major conference team who kind of got snubbed. You look at the Southeastern Conference, the SEC. They had a bit of a down year. You have Kentucky, you have Vanderbilt, who maybe shouldn't have made it, in the field. And then you have Florida, who had an okay type season, who did not make it. But more importantly, I think South Carolina at 24-8, a solid in-conference record, and a couple of decent wins, just on the outside. That's one of the few upset type snubs for your major conferences. And then you have another team that I thought, of course, the Lucky Legends, also with a Cinderella story, Valparaiso. They were 26-6 on the year, but did not make the field of 68 as well. So, with all that said, that's some of your snubs and your Lucky Legends, your surprises to get in as we look at the field of 68 now. Moving forward, we'll talk about the number 1 seeds. And like I said, this is going to be a little bit of a short show today, a little bit of a preview of sorts as we prepare for March Madness. And Cody and I will reveal our brackets later in the week. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter at CT_Sports Report, and you can find our CT Sports Report Bracket Challenge on there, as well as Facebook at CT Sports Report. Now, your top teams, also a little controversy here in the tournament, with your number 1 seeds. Those number 1 seeds are North Carolina, Kansas, Virginia, and Oregon. You would say 2 of those are pretty much locks because they were outright champions both in regular season and in their conference tournament. That's North Carolina and Kansas, with Kansas being the overall number 1 seed, North Carolina being 2. The 2 that folks might have exception with are Virginia and Oregon, and really Oregon in particular. Virginia, second in the conference regular season in the ACC. A very hard-fought battle, ugly UVA-style game in the ACC championship against UNC. But they held on. And did they hold on to that 1 spot because of the success that they've had in the past 3 years where, they've got to that championship level, they've got to that Elite 8 level for several years in a row now, and they're just so fundamentally sound and very, very smart, and they wear you down. So they're the type of team that can beat just about anybody with their defense. People might have chosen, say, Michigan State over them, who also won their conference tournament on Sunday, who I thought with Valentine on Michigan State would actually be the number 1 seed over Virginia. And the other one being Oregon out of the West, Virginia being the Midwest, Kansas in the South, North Carolina in the East. Oregon in the West, you have the Pac-12 champs, Pac-12. That conference in basketball, to me, has not been that great in the last several years. Now, me being the North Carolina fan that I am, if we win our 116 matchup, which God forbid we lose, we could potentially play USC, who finished pretty high in the Pac-12. And I may end up eating my words if USC gives us a great game or even beats us in the second round. So with that said, Oregon gets your number 1 seed as the Pac-12 champion. Who I would have replaced Oregon with based on the name of the player and what they also have done in the past couple of years, and that's Oklahoma. Buddy Hield, probably the National Player of the Year, pretty darn close if he won't be. They've had a fantastic year. No reason they should not be a number 1 seed. They've been in the top 5 all year long. They didn't quite peak at the right time, I don't think. They were a little hotter earlier in the season. But if you're going to based on the body of work throughout the season, I believe that Oklahoma has a little bit of an edge over Oregon. So that was a little preview for your March Madness, a little bit about the coverage, the snubs, the surprises, and a little controversy there with the number 1 seeds. Just a reminder, as always, on Twitter at CT_Sports Report and on Facebook at CT Sports Report as well. Everybody tweet Cody at CRT008 and give him a get well message. He's, like I said, a little bit under the weather this evening. So I hopped on for a bit and gave you a show as we promised yesterday. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening. And Cody and I will be back later this week to reveal our brackets, our Final Fours, and our national champions. Again, the CT Sports Report Bracket Challenge is on at Twitter and Facebook. All the links are up, and we hope you will join us on that. Thanks so much for joining me this evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Chris Callicutt for the CT Sports Report. We will see you later this week. Have a great night.